Good people, welcome to the latest episode of Jonathan Thinks. I'm Jonathan Collins, your friendly neighborhood democracy scholar. I've got a few things on my mind, and maybe, just maybe, you've been thinking about them too. All right. So to get today's episode started, I got really 3 questions that are just heavy on my mind. I've been on the internet, I've been seeing what people are saying, what you guys have been talking about. And there's like 3 things in particular that really caught my eye. I want to see if you've been thinking about these same things too. First question: why are we not more terrified about this board of peace situation that emerged out of Davos? Now, for those of you who don't know, President Trump recently made global headlines when he announced the creation of a board of peace and signed on to this board of peace. I'm seeing conflicting stories. I initially saw 36 countries. When I looked into it more closely, what I'm finding is about 21 to 23 countries that agreed to sign on to this board of peace as a part of Trump's now conglomeration around this new world order. That's what it essentially looks like. It looks like he's creating a new world order. Now, this started as a attempt to create some kind of like post-Gaza stabilization, and we wanted to bring countries together to help stabilize the country in the aftermath of the conflict. But what's really happening is there are a bunch of countries now, over 20 plus, that are signed on, and then you start to look at the list of the countries, and I'm just saying it gets a little spooky. It just gets a little spooky. You're talking about, here, look, I'll just put it this way. Azerbaijan, not a democracy. Bahrain, not a democracy. Belarus, not a democracy. Egypt, not a democracy. Jordan, not a democracy. Kazakhstan, not a democracy. You get my point? Most of these countries that are signing on to be a part of this board of peace are authoritarian or one party or monarchies where leaders have at their disposal the ability to just enact unilateral harm on their citizens. And you're telling me that this board of peace, chaired by President Trump, who has just been unleashing ICE on American citizens in Minnesota like water hoses in the 1960s, this new board of peace is going to bring stability to the Middle East? Now, the only thing that this is going to bring to the Middle East is probably his dreams of creating that crazy golf course resort thing that we saw Trump talking about a couple months ago. You guys remember this? You remember seeing the White House releasing those pictures of what they call it, the Gaza Riviera, right? It was this whole like it was like these AI generated images of Trump statues and you know, water fountains and golf courses and this whole like tourist paradise that they were essentially going to take public money and turn the Gaza Strip into. Yeah, we thought it was jokes. And now you're looking up and he's creating a new world order, an international conglomerate of countries who are signing on for post-stabilization. Sounds like they're going to make that crazy resort thing happen. Gazelago. Right? It's funny, but it's not. And that gets me to my second question. Because the New World Order has me thinking a lot about the concept of sinners. But not sinners just in the sense of evil and holy. Sinners in the sense of one of my favorite movies that came out last year. Written and directed by Ryan Coogler, starring Michael B. Jordan. Sinners was an amazing movie that told a beautiful story of these twin characters played by Michael B. Jordan who escape the smoke from the mob of Chicago find themselves migrating back home to the Mississippi Delta, use money that they seem to have stolen from Al Capone and liquor bottles that they had stolen from the mob to open up their own juke joint. And from there, all hell breaks loose. Now, this was a beautiful film. At the center of it is this idea of the blues as a intergenerational griot that tells a story of Black life and Black survival and Black beauty from the beginning of time into the future. And that beauty is so strong, so powerful, that it attracts the evil eye and glare of vampires. And what I want to say here is that I think, one, we need to understand why Sinners was amazing. You know, again, one was what I just mentioned. I think this idea of Black music being one of the core tenets of storytelling in our world history is understated. Two, I love the way it's shot. It's just beautiful. The aesthetics. And we often don't see the beautiful aesthetics shown in depictions of Black life, especially in the U.S. South. As a Southerner, that's something that is very close and personal to me. And then one thing we need to understand, too, is that this is more complicated than just white vampire terrorizes Black people. I've seen a lot of takes about that. It's not just that. You know, the vampires are Irish for a reason. And it's about the Irish settlers as their own sort of music culture that emerges out of, the Irish background. The story is very, very powerful because you got the Irish character that is the lead vampire that is engaging in terrorism, and they're not approaching they're not approaching the juke joint, the Black juke joint in the Mississippi Delta, as we are here to terrorize you out of racism. They're actually operating themselves as a race, and they're terrorizing under the idea, misconstrued as it may be, that the vampire race is the true race of love and acceptance. We actually get down the same way you guys get down. You need to come and get down with us. That's the message. The actual racism doesn't actually happen until the very end of the movie, and I won't spoil it for folks who haven't seen it. But the point here is that the movie is amazing. And I'm glad to see that it's nominated 16 times at the upcoming Oscar award show. The question will be, how well will Sinners fare? 16 nominations, the most nomination for a film in the history of the Oscar award show. The most nominations in Oscars history. The films that it surpasses in nominations: All About Eve, Titanic, La La Land. The whitest films that you can imagine. And now suddenly at the top of the hill is this blackety black movie about Black folks in the South fighting off vampires. That's amazing. Now, if you're skeptical, you're saying, well, okay, yeah, I hear you, but look what happened at the Golden Globes. They only got 7 nominations there. I think they only took home maybe 2 awards from the Golden Globes. We're probably going to see a repeat of this at the Oscars. Remember the whole Oscars so white scenario that had us boycotting the Oscars, what, less than 10 years ago? Don't forget, I think we're right to be skeptical. But don't be surprised if Sinners becomes the belle of the ball and takes home award after award after award. And I hope it does, and it's important that it does, because we've seen a decline in Black content creation being supported by these major platforms. We haven't seen an Insecure in a while. We haven't seen an Atlanta in a while. They just canceled the Vince Staples show on Netflix. Black content creators are not getting the resources and the support and the visibility. And so it's important that Sinners reminds the film and television industry that Black stories are central to a thriving film and media industry. And so I'm rooting for Sinners, and I hope you're rooting for Sinners too. That was my second question. My third and final question. This tenderism situation, why does this matter? I'm not going to hold you. When I first saw the story, when I first saw the viral videos, not my cup of tea, not my bag, didn't really understand the sensation. I see an old black guy holding up meat, it falls off the bone. I'm like, y'all never seen nobody who could grill before? This is the first time y'all ever seen somebody who can really get you that tender, fall off the bone meat coming off the stacks. Y'all never seen this before? I'm from West Tennessee, outside of Memphis. I've been seeing that my whole life. There's nothing particularly interesting about that. It's just like, oh, that's how it's supposed to go. Patience takes time. But the closer that I looked into the story, that's when I started to get really, really interested in it. Because the Tinder story has now ignited this conversation around intellectual colonialism. And so when we say intellectual colonialism, what are we talking about? It's this idea that the culture, that Black culture, can essentially be co-opted and colonized and exploited. And if you look deeper into the story, it's hard to see that not being what's happening here. So the Black man in the videos, Mr. Walter Johnson, apparently he does not actually own the barbecue restaurant in Marietta, California that has now gone viral for those Tenderism videos. It's actually owned by a man named Nick Yepremian. And Mr. Yepremian was a coffee sales guy. He was running a coffee shop. He meets Walter Johnson, and Walter Johnson convinces him to go into the barbecue business. All right, cool. Well, it's Mr. Walter Johnson who becomes the face of this whole cultural Tenderism movement. It's this blackface that has now led to the explosion of the Tenderism movement that led Mr. Yepremian, the white owner of the barbecue restaurant, to now submit a trademark for Tenderism so that he can continue to profit off of this newly constructed cultural brand. The issue here is not just this instance of exploitation. The issue is that we've seen this movie before. That actually, if you look deeper into the history of trademark policy in the U.S., it is rooted and deeply born out of racial exploitation. So early trademark protections, they begin in the 1800s, in the late 19th century, as state common law, when Jim Crow laws were still in full effect. And so you started to see the emergence of Black images and Black figures branded as assets before Black folks even have the right to use an integrated bathroom. And of course, before they had rights to be able to apply for their own trademarks or copyrights. And so you think I'm making this up? Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben, Cream of Wheat. These are all brands that were established before Black people even had civil rights in this country. And speaking of Aunt Jemima, in 1915, so the passage of the courts established the Aunt Jemima Doctrine, which essentially is what now allows trademark owners to block any similar products from trademarking their products in a way that could even conflate or can be confused with the existing product. So the main purpose of the trademark is to make sure that nobody else uses your brand. And you know what landmark case was used to actually establish this as precedent? Aunt Jemima, the image of a Black woman on a pancake box in a syrup bottle. This started with colonizing, with branding, Black culture. And now we look up over 100 years later with this Tenderism situation, and it's happening again. And it just tells you, it reminds you that Black culture must always be protected, not just culturally, not just socially, not just on the internet, but legally and in policy and in practice. The Black body can be exploited even without violence. Mr. Walter Johnson is not experiencing any bodily harm. But what he is experiencing is the potential loss of resources, of money, of revenue, of wealth generation that could set up his kids, his grandkids, his great-grandkids. When we see intergenerational racial disparities emerge, they start in these little moments like this. So the Tenderism videos, big deal? Not really. But this whole issue of intellectual property, of cultural colonization, oh man, that's major. That's major. And so if you're working on a brand, if you're working on a business, make sure that you're getting your intellectual property game together. And as a community, we should be fighting for our brothers and sisters who are putting out cultural ideas and not getting the proper ownership. So those are just some things on my mind, a few things that I'm thinking about. And so, good people, that concludes today's episode of Jonathan Thinks. Again, I am Jonathan Collins, your friendly neighborhood democracy scholar. Thank you to our producer, Mo, who's working behind the scenes. Remember that every time we convene, it's an opportunity to grow. We do it with love. We do it with joy. We do it together. These are a few of my thoughts. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, you were thinking about it too. Peace.